Hello, and welcome to my channel, where I explain leftist topics in as brief and understandable a fashion as I possibly can. The purpose of this video is not to convince you that I am right, but to explain my interpretation of the leftist point of view. Because if you are going to disagree with it, you should at least know what it is you disagree with. With that in mind, I hope the discussion in the comments stays focused on understanding rather than mockery. Today's topic is the concept of sex and gender, and the difference between the two. Sex, on its most basic level, is determined by your sex chromosomes. This is actually a gross oversimplification of the complexity of biological sex, but simplifications can be useful for grasping certain concepts. If you'd like me to go into greater detail in another video, leave a comment saying so. For the purpose of this discussion, we are going to proceed under the assumption that XX chromosomes equals female, and XY chromosomes equals male, since this is the case 99% of the time. Sex is a scientific term. However, leftists and many academics view the term gender as a social construct. That they are categories we made up to fulfill a certain purpose. They say this in part because not every culture has the same number of genders. India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh recognize a third gender referred to as hijra. A simplified explanation of this third gender would be that these are individuals who are of the male sex, but typically take on feminine gender roles. That said, there is more cultural nuance that we don't have time to get into. The Bugis people have 5 genders. Orowane, which are individuals who are biologically male and socially masculine. Makanrai, biologically females who are socially feminine. Kalabai, who are biologically male and socially feminine. Kalalai, who are biologically female and socially masculine. And Bisu, a more androgynous gender often considered sacred. Their language also does not use gendered pronouns, the English equivalent of referring to everyone as either they or them. This of course seems like an alien concept to people of a two-gendered culture, but it is important to keep in mind that if you had been raised in such a culture, the idea of reducing people down to only 2 genders would likely seem just as foreign to you. Another way you can see that gender is a social construct is that, for most of human history, chromosomes and the idea of a biological sex were completely unknown. Gender was entirely based upon physical appearance. If you had XY chromosomes in ancient Rome, but due to Swyer syndrome had a feminine-appearing anatomy that included a uterus and fallopian tubes, you would have been referred to as a woman, and if you said otherwise likely would have been considered delusional. Trans people and biologists today find themselves in a similar situation, trying to explain that sex and gender is a lot more complicated than was originally thought, and being labeled as delusional by the general public for believing so. This concludes our discussion on the definitions of sex and gender. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thank you for your time.